once in a while, just when the faithful who care enough about the state of things in the church think they have an idea of how things are going and what the lay of the land is, Benedict XVI emerges from his study and releases a statement to give his thoughts on things going on at the moment. Some truly appreciate when he does this, and others find it confusing, since he said upon his retirement that he would keep a low profile and not say much of anything about anything in the church, but in reality, he speaks several times a year, and when he does, it usually raises a few eyebrows. And usually when he does, it's through his personal secretary, Archbishop George Ganswein. So let's check in with Benedict, because he is saying things this time that, while not that surprising, helps us to paint a picture of what the Vatican is addressing in regards to Germany trying to go it alone with its so-called synodal way, which if you watched my video yesterday, you'll know that the Vatican is pushing for now as well, which makes me wonder why they're not on the same page about the direction Francis is taking the church. Our story comes from the website of Italian journalist Marco Tossati, who is a great source on all things Vatican City. He begins by reminding us that the CDF's recent statement that simply reiterated timeless Catholic teaching on the nuptial sacrament and certain sins was rather roundly rejected by the German Bishops' Conference, who have promised to not only forge their own path on that one, that would make St. Peter's work more timely than ever for us, if we're being honest. The bishops of Benedict's home country have said that they will give the Eucharist to pretty much anyone who wants it, which is also a clear change from the timeless teachings of the Church. According to them, all the person must do before receiving is to do an examination of conscience like a Catholic is supposed to do before approaching the altar for the Eucharist. Now, the reason this is gaining as much attention as it is because they're talking about opening the Eucharist to our separated brethren, the acolytes of Luther, Calvin, Henry, Zwingli, and anyone else you can name. And that's where the writer for this piece on Tossati's website begins, and then they go into this. Now, because the article was written in Italian and then translated into English via the Chrome translation extension, I do need to clean this up a bit for syntax reasons, so I'm paraphrasing the following here for clarity. But the writer informs us that Benedict is keeping a watchful eye on things going on over there. We know this from his personal assistant, again, Archbishop George Ganswein, who describes this in the following way. It is evident that the situation of the Catholic Church in Germany is currently characterized by strenuous opinions that require monitoring. Benedict XVI is aware of all of this at home. It perceives and recognizes the lack of unity in many fundamental aspects of the faith. Unfortunately, the German episcopate lacks a unitary approach that requires clarification as soon as possible, that avoids serious consequences both for the Church and for the faith in Germany. A few words, but that leave no room for doubt. Ratzinger does not hide his concern of serious consequences both for the faith and for the Church in Germany, if we do not return to full agreement on many fundamental aspects of the faith. So there you have it. Francis said something similar a few years ago when the Germans first announced their plan to push forward with the changes the laity were asking for. Now, at that time, Francis said the German bishops, needed to act as one with them, Rome, and to work out these complex theological questions and their real-life implications in union with the Holy See. And Francis has even since then hinted that he thinks they may break away entirely from Rome. Yes, Francis spoke about the possibility of a schism with the Church in Germany. Often in these things, Benedict and Francis, by the way, speak in unison. That is, of course, if what Benedict is said to have said came from him at all, since I know now that some people are asking that question in light of recent statements made by Benedict that do seem to be out of character. But that's not all that was said in this piece. Ganswein let a few things out that are interesting, to say the least. We all know that Benedict had a difficult papacy, to put it mildly, and that it was the probable real cause for him to retire when he did. Now, popes don't retire, not typically at any rate, and precious few in the 2,000-year history of the Church ever retired. But Benedict did, and Ganswein had some things to say about that. Again, paraphrasing because of the odd translation. Ganswein was very clear in answering the question about the difficulties encountered by Benedict in his pontificate, stating that in addition to entrusting the definitive answer to history, everyone knows that the figure and work of Benedict XVI was met with pushback, opposition, and rejection in certain environments, and not so much for his way of communicating, but rather for the specific content of his teaching. This is an unpleasant experience lived by all those who follow a clear and limpid line in announcing and teaching the Catholic faith. Another thing are the images and misconceptions the world had about Cardinal Ratzinger, since he was prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. These misconceptions, after a truce in the first year of his pontificate, they returned later with serious distortions. But everyone knows that Benedict XVI has never allowed himself to be influenced by this move, to paint him in a false light. Ganswein goes on to say that none of this influenced Benedict's work, which then makes us wonder why he retired. And of course, for those of you who may not be aware, just to cover our bases, Cardinal Ratzinger and Benedict XVI are the same person. Anyway, Benedict always said he retired because he wasn't physically up to the demands of the pontificate anymore. Either way, the Church has been in a pretty rough spot since he retired, to again put it overly mildly. In the same interview, Ganswein has no way to answer the question of whether Francis was able to benefit from Benedict XVI's knowledge of the Church in Germany during all of this, because the talks between the two are extremely confidential, according to Ganswein, and the details remain between them. Now, personally, I would take that as a no, then, that Francis isn't really taking much of what Benedict says all that seriously, and why would he? To the world, Francis has the keys of Peter, and the Pope is free to have, as an advisor, anyone he wishes. When Francis meets with Benedict, we always get pictures of the event, almost to remind us of a sort of hermeneutic of papal continuity, which is just kind of funny to think about. And Ganswein even has thoughts on this idea, a hermeneutic of papal continuity. You see, Ganswein has been busy lately. Benedict's secretary/handler has a new book that I'm sure everyone is going to just rush out to your local Barnes & Noble to get a copy of. His book sounds scintillating, by the way. It's a collection of essays he wrote from 2014 to 2019, while he was both secretary for Francis and Benedict at the same time, before Francis told him to focus on Benedict exclusively after one of those times Benedict got some statement or essay published that raised a few eyebrows. Personally, I can't wait to read the book. I'm sure it's even more exciting than it sounds. And while he was making the rounds promoting it, he said that it was inappropriate to rank and compare one pontiff to another. So, people who admire, say, a St. Pius V over a more recent pope like, say, Paul VI aren't doing it right, I guess. In an interview with a European outlet that I've never heard of, but was reprinted in Crux Online, that outlet being Alpha and Omega, he said this, quote, "Last week, speaking with Alpha and Omega, Ganswein had used the term inappropriate, himself arguing that even though it's understandable and excusable to try to compare the various popes, to create a ranking based on the merits of each one, it's also inappropriate to do so. But we must convince ourselves that the criteria of this ranking do not depend on applause or a common denominator, but on how they bear witness to Jesus Christ, true man and true God, the Savior of the world. Each pontiff does so with his peculiarities, with all the differences of character, intellectual formation, spiritual maturation, experiential heritage, but this difference is precisely the manifestation that no pope is the successor of his predecessor, but rather the successor of the Apostle Peter." End quote. That actually makes it sound like it would be appropriate to compare each one, since you have you're supposed to, each pope is supposed to be the Apostle of Peter, not the Apostle of the predecessor, but what do I know? So don't compare St. Pius X, who, say, created numerous bulwarks in the Church against modernism, to Francis, who created and strengthened numerous bridges to Caesar. And certainly don't point out the obvious differences between Francis and Benedict, though instead focus on how often they are on the same page. And if reports are accurate out of Vatican City, they often are on the same page. But again, that's if those reports are accurate. I'll let you decide on that. So Benedict is keeping a watchful eye on the German Bishops' Conference. I know there are some who say that I spend too much time watching the Church over there when it is in pretty much the same shape anywhere you look, but remember, the Church in Germany has been a force for influence in the Vatican since before the Council, and their theologians and bishops took a lead role at the Second Vatican Council, including then Father Ratzinger, I might add. The Church in Germany is always worth keeping an eye on because until now, the way the Church went in that country was how it went pretty much everywhere else eventually, with the various bishops' conferences adopting their ideas and promoting them in a diocese near you. It probably won't be that different here, especially with a synod on the clergy coming in just 10 months that will not coincidentally address some of the topics the bishops in that country have promised to address. What do you think about this? Let me know in the comments, please. And subscribe, and click the bell with the all settings so you don't miss a beat. And all my sources are on my sources website, returntotradition.org. Skip past the Patreon pop-up so you can have a look at it. No paywall there. As always, pray for the Church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.